Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Theology and Around. My guest today is my very good friend Jay Newman. How do I even want to prepare you for this conversation? First of all, Jay Newman, we go way back, at least 10 years ago or so. We've been friends for a while. Jay is the co-founder and owner of Newman Family BBQ, a barbecue company in Nashville, Tennessee. Please do look him up. He makes some of the best brisket I've ever had in my life, and he is very religious about Jesus in a good way. I know some people say religious in a bad way, but in a good way. And he's very religious about barbecue as well. In fact, he has a whole theology of barbecue that if you hang out with Jay, he's very happy to tell you about. But Jay is not a formal scholar, but he is one of the sharper thinkers that I know. He's in fact, he's going to hate it that I say this, but he when he takes like an IQ test, his test comes out. His IQ is significantly higher than mine. He's just a natural good thinker, even though he's not like a formal scholar or anything. So I always enjoy talking to Jay, and Jay and I have frequent conversations about politics. Jay would be a self-described Christian anarchist. Jay believes, for instance, voting is a sin. Jay has some less than popular views on politics, some of which overlap with mine actually quite a bit. In fact, Jay and I, we resonate a lot more with each other's thoughts more than we diverge. But I also like to try to push back on some of Jay's thoughts, really, because some of he might say something and I'm like, I might lean that direction, but let's tease this out a little bit more. So that's what this conversation is. It is a free-flowing, unedited, uncut, lengthy bantering between me and my friend about all things related to politics, the deep state, the military-industrial complex, and why the United States is not an actual democracy. Yes, we talk about all those things. We also include a rather lengthy appendix at the end of this episode where we spend about a half hour talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers and baseball. So you're free to listen to that if you want. But we just decided to keep recording and talk about the Dodgers and baseball. So if you're into that sort of thing, you might enjoy that conversation. If you're not into it, then you can just, not listen to it or whatever. So I also do want to give a little warning up front. Jay, he has a colorful vocabulary. So there are some, there were some curse words that were used by Jay in this podcast. So I just I don't police my my guest language. That's just kind of a policy I have. I also don't use language, and that's also a policy that I have as well as a host. But when I do have people that do use swear on the podcast, I like to at least let people know ahead of time. Hey, this is coming, just in case you're listening. I've had people email me before, saying, "Hey, I was doing the dishes. My 5-year-old was around listening to your podcast, and I wish I would have known ahead of time that there was going to be swearing. So I'm letting you know ahead of time that there will be swearing." So honestly, though, I think some of you might be more offended at Jay's beliefs more than his swearing. So I'll give that trigger warning as well. So anyway, I'm going to stop stalling. Without further ado, please welcome back to the show my very good friend, the one and only Jay Newman. Jay Newman. Jay, do you remember last time you were on Theology in the Raw?
I do remember. Yeah, it was a couple years more.
Two or three. And I think it's coming up on 3 years ago.
I told you were an anarchist.
Why title?
And you didn't want to admit it.
Okay, so let's give a little backstory. Yeah, so I think I even titled that podcast, I think I might be an anarchist or something. Which, looking back, I've tried to tone in. I've tried to be a little more careful as I get older. Just not being unnecessarily provocative. I don't want to be that guy. Just, you get the headline that draws people in and stuff. But so that one was a little, I think I might be an anarchist. I mean, I definitely got some emails about that. But yeah, it's been a few years, man. We keep having these conversations. I've had a lot of political conversations on my podcast, and you don't listen to all my episodes, but you listen to a good deal. So yeah, I brought you on to love to hear your thinking in the last few years. You're thinking on politics, and as you kind of think about, you overhear me talking about politics and stuff. We have offline conversations, so Yeah, I got no specific
Right.
like a goal in mind here. Would just love to kind of debrief on how Christians should think about our political situation.
Yeah, let's wrap. And you've written a book in the meantime on the topic. So, I mean, I think that we agree, but I'm probably deeper down the well than you're willing to go. And
Okay.
I think that I am increasingly getting pushed to, like, I'm really trying not to be like a prepper removed from society, you know, just like solar power off the grid. But like, it's pretty tempting. Like it's tempting to like just go that route. But like, I'm like, no, I'm too wrapped up in society and technology. And like, it's just my livelihood is too tied up in it. And so even just, I make barbecue. That's how I make money. And it's like, you would think I don't need all that, but no, I've got to grow my Instagram followers and I've got to, you know, I've got to build my brand. And it's like, so it's like, it's almost like this social contract. Like we're willing to give away our privacy and a bit of our autonomy, so that we can survive. And it's like, you know, you're giving it away. Like I told you before you hit record, like I just downloaded another app and I just allowed them to give me notifications. It's like one more piece of consent, one more piece of myself I'm giving away, one more piece of my brain space and time. And it's like, man, it's just, we are the product. We are the consumer and we are the product. And the more it gets that way, you just want to escape. But the more troubling thing is that government is supposed to, in some ways, ideally, okay, now I don't know if it's ever achieved this, but an ideal government is supposed to regulate these kind of interests for the benefit of the people, because there's a general acknowledgement if the people don't flourish, then the society will crumble, right? I don't know that government has ever fully achieved that, but it's supposed to kind of level the playing field, right? And it's not doing that, and it hasn't been doing that. And I'm not even sure that it's designed to do that. And so where I am, it's just like, I'm anti-government aside from my faith, right?
What do you mean?
I don't see it as
aside from your faith. What do you mean?
Well, just if I was agnostic about God, I would look at the world right now and I would be like, the government's not for me. They're not serving my interest or my family's interest. So I would already be skeptical of that. So it's easy enough. Now, some people go the other way and say the only solution is the government. The only way we're going to help society is by passing new laws or policies or whatever. But I see that, no, there are interests with more power, more money. I'll never compete with that. And they actually want to take what I have to increase their power and wealth. And most people sense that. Most people sense, like, there is a sense in our growing sense in our world of like regular folks who are just like, you're taking too much. Like we're willing to give some, you know, because we get something. But it's kind of in the last 4 or 5 years or so, definitely since 2020, there's an increasing sense of you're taking too much and I'm not going to give anymore, you know? And so I'm saying aside from my faith. Now you combine that with what I think is, the only biblical political theology.
That's pretty bold, dude.
I really like. I don't. Right, I know. You hate absolute statements. I know you hate.
That's fine. No, yeah. I want you be you, man. I want to. Why don't you lay out? How would you? If someone said, Jay, in 5 minutes, what is your political position? How would you describe that?
I think the government is always against the people.
Which government? You're talking like all the government.
All government. All government, all human government. And I'm in line with a lot of the founding fathers of the United States in saying this. Okay. So all government, it bends towards corruption, bends towards abuse. And so the best government is the smallest government, the one that has the most checks and balances, the one that, because there's an acknowledgement you need some sort of order and structure. Otherwise, people are going to take advantage of no power, the power gaps. Interests are going to take advantage of that, right? So you do need something, but it's the best government is the smallest one, the one that's the least one, because it is inherently prone to evil. You know, it's governments who make war. It's governments who create borders and make decisions on who can live where and who qualifies as a citizen or who can get a visa. I mean, they're making these decisions that affect human life that is always going to bend towards help, you know, good for some and bad for others. Mm-hmm. And so inherently government is not for people, even though we say the government for the people. That's what we're aiming for, but there is no such thing as government for the people inherently.
Can we make a distinction? And this is I get this pushback, and I'll probably, because I do resonate with you know, just so people know, Jay and I talk all the time offline and have these conversations, and you know, yeah, we're going to resonate a lot more than we're not. But I do like to represent pushbacks that I get and say, well, what about this? What about that?
Well, that's what I love about you. Bring it.
Well, one of the biggest pushbacks I get, just in light of what you just said, is failing to make a distinction between like local people who work for the government versus the kind of national, the elites and Congress and Senate and White House and DC and all the corruption that's there. I mean, I think there's most people when you think about Washington, they're going to be tons of corruption, power, money, elites, Jeffrey Epstein's, you know, whatever. But look, what about the stay-at-home mom that you know, her husband left her with 3 kids and she got a job at the DMV? I mean, she's a government employee, right? Is she you know, is she part of the problem? Like, you know, the National Park Ranger or whoever is still working for the government, or even like a local council person or whatever that really does just want to make their community a better place. Like, there has to be room for people like that, right?
I think government's necessary. Okay. I mean, I think it should be more local as possible, okay, and as small and unobtrusive as possible. But I mean, I'm not just like everybody. Well, I mean, listen, you just go watch a Western, you know, I mean, in the power gap, people will rise up and take advantage of others. You know, they're in a world where people are willing to annihilate other people. Yeah, something has to be in that power gap.
So if there's no government, there'd be gangsters and mafia, and somebody would.
Yeah, exactly. It would be something in its place. Exactly. It will be that way. So, you know, something where you have a voice is better than, you say the mafia or something, or like, you know, I mean, you just go back into ancient times. Humans have always worked this way. You get warlords or just look at Africa now, you know, certain parts where there is weak government or non-existent government, you have warlords rise up, and something's going to fill that gap. And so I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, if we got government out of the way, everything would be, you know, utopia or whatever. But yes, as much as you can, I think you should make it local and small and like leave people alone.
So when you speak
as best you can.
When you speak negatively about the government, you're thinking more on the national big picture level, not necessarily.
No, I'm definitely an anti-federalist, but I think there just needs to be a general acknowledgement that when I say government is necessary, you're just getting a better bad guy. It's not good. It's not an inherent good. Government is not an ontological good. It's better described as a necessary evil. So it's not that I'm saying I'm pro-government.
Right.
I'm acknowledging it's a better evil than
no government.
You know, warlords or the mafia or whatever, you know, chaos. It's better than chaos. There's at least some order to it. But I don't put the pressure on government to be good because I just don't think it's possible. It's not good. And so people like look at it as like this intrinsic good. And it's like, it's not. And like, go back to ninth grade civics class, like the founding fathers all talked like they knew it was that way.
Really?
You know, this is not good, but because of that, we're going to try to keep it small. We're going to try to keep it local, and we don't want a king. We want representative government so that people at least have some semblance of a say. And I agree. That's better. That's better. It's still not good. It's not an inherent good. And that's all. I'm belaboring the point.
Do you
now,
think, so yeah, I you know a lot more about U.S. history and stuff than I do. Do you think that the vision of the founding fathers, that the way the American system works now does it reflect their vision? Is it a departure? Is it a radical departure?
Oh, no.
If they showed up today, would they be?
The Federalists won.
Huh?
Yeah, the Federalists won. Alexander Hamilton won. You know, it's not, I don't think it's in line with their vision. I think post Civil War it departed. Like, I mean, honestly, it didn't. The true, you know, Jeffersonian model. I mean, you really want to get extreme. Like Patrick Henry's one of my favorite, but he was too extreme to ever be like mainline. But I mean, he's very much, I love Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or give me death. He had the great one-liner, you know, but like he never really got the liberty that he was fighting for, you know? So, and I'm Baptist. I'm really Baptist. And there were Baptists in some of the early documents, and, you know, separation of church and state. Like, let's draw a clear line between these two things. And in some ways, like it was over and against a concept like a Church of England, which I know you've had some guests trying to promote something, making very poor arguments about how the church and state are natural, buddies. And it's like, no, they're natural enemies. Like they don't go together. So, yeah. What are you chuckling about?
Oh, I know.
You know what I'm saying?
We had some offline debrief about that. So, okay, let's go, and maybe we can return to that point, but, government is a necessary evil, but it could be more evil or less evil. Let's just assume your premise that, okay, it's an ontological, not good thing, but better than the other options, but still bad. It could be worse. So this is where somebody, I mean, the famous line from Martin Luther King, like I forget the exact quote. You can't legislate somebody to love me, or you can't legislate, people to be ethical, but you can stop him from lynching me. And I think that's really important too. Like there are better laws and worse laws, and more evil and less evil that could happen. And this would be the argument for, if Christians really care about their neighbor, if they care about the good of the city, if they care about, being seeking the good and welfare of the city, Jeremiah 29, then we should care about contributing good toward the government, making the government less evil, more good, for the sake of loving our neighbors. That's a really broad way to summarize maybe a counter argument. Yeah,
it's interesting, to invoke MLK is always, it's becoming like there needs to be like a law about like every time MLK is invoked, but like there's context there. Like not everyone agreed with MLK at the time. There were people who said no, like the Black Panthers or, Nation of Islam. Black Muslims, like they're just like, no, the only way is to burn the system down. And of course, I think naively, like, well, then some system will rise in its place. Yeah. But, from their perspective, it's like, well, at least we'll be in charge of that one, maybe. I mean, I guess that's what every revolutionary thinks. Yeah. They're like, if I overthrow this one, then we'll run it better. And then they never do run it better. And they're just as corrupt. It's just a different group in power now. And it's, it's an endless cycle of human history. And so that's why I'm not a revolutionary. And I think Jesus wasn't. That's why Jesus was not a zealot, because it's just participating in that cycle of new revolutions and new power groups. And he was just like, no, I'm doing away with that. And so, MLK, it's like that. Yes, that's a good quote, but that government killed him. You want to go down the conspiracy hole, but I feel very confident that the CIA at least had a hand in, and it wasn't because of the civil rights stuff. It was because he started being anti-Vietnam.
Yeah.
So you start messing with the money, that's when they get you. And the money comes from war.
Yeah.
And you start messing with the money, they took him out. And so I'm just like, that's the thing. They're like, okay, you can have your civil rights. We're cool with that. Because in some ways, it's almost like it was a distraction from what they're really doing globally. It's like, no, we're stirring up wars and creating huge tax dollar budgets that are making people rich and justified because we're spreading democracy, which is a farce. But, it's fine. Civil rights is a distraction. They're like, yeah, fine. Focus on that. As soon as he stopped focusing on that and started focusing on the real thing, they killed him. So it's like,
people
that's not a good argument for the government. Like it's just not, MLK is not a good argument for the necessity of government because I don't know where I sit, the government killed him. So
you said to go down the conspiracy route? Is that what people?
It's not verified. I mean, it never will be unless they release documents. But there's enough smoke there.
Really,
there's enough smoke.
What's some of this?
It's like JFK. Do you think the CIA killed JFK?
I mean,
I'm like totally convinced. I'm totally convinced.
Based on what?
Oh my gosh, dude, there's not enough time. But
maybe just give one.
I would just say,
just so people know you're not just making stuff up.
Yeah, well, I would say the most convincing case is by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who almost dispassionately explains the sequence of events that led up to his uncle's and his father's assassinations and the evidence that was given and how that could not have been the story of their assassinations, and it's just too much coincidence that they started being against what we call now the deep state interests are, or, the pro-war agenda at the time. And to see the policy change almost immediately when they died, it's like JFK wasn't going to send troops into Vietnam. And it's like within months of his assassination, we're all in on Vietnam, and there's a whole thing, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, whatever you think about him as a candidate for president, he's obviously spent a lot of time researching something that affected his family deeply. And the evidence is pretty dang compelling that this, and MLK too. I mean, I think the CIA is like, well, we're in deep now. We already killed a president. What are we not going to kill a civil rights leader? What are we not going to kill a nominee for president? It's like they crossed the Rubicon on that, and we haven't gone back. Like they're willing to do whatever it takes to keep the interests of global manipulation and constant war mongering going. They're willing to do whatever it takes to keep that. That's their meal ticket. You
talk about
so they're incentivized to keep wars going.
The military industrial complex and how much power.
You can't even put one name on it. You say CIA, but then it's like, well, it's not even really properly the CIA, NSA. Well, those are the ones we know about. There are 3-letter organizations that we probably never heard of. It goes down deep, and it's like, I'm not trying to go all Alex Jones. I think he's off the rails, but I think he was on to something that made him crazy. And it's like, you're just being naive if you just dismiss it all. It's all conspiracy. It's just like, no, they're not. The least we can say is if you look into it even a little, the government is not for you. They're not for you, and they're using you because they know if we don't keep doing commerce and interacting socially, well, there's no more taxes for them to take. And that's their meal ticket. So they want to keep us happy, keep us going. But man, the cracks are starting to show. Like,
Yeah.
society more than ever in my life feels like it's about to undergo a major shift. That's all. I don't know. You know, people are doomsaying and stuff. And it's like, no, things will happen like they always do, but these things go in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it does feel like things are about to really fall apart.
What are you basing that on? Why does it feel that way?
How much everything costs versus how much people make. The artificial inflation of the dollar, and the real possibility that the dollar has competition in the global marketplace with new currencies that are being developed. The constant chess pieces of war. No one wants to get into a real war, and yet they're all making these moves that are like way. I mean, my gosh, we don't even blink. It's $60 billion being sent to Ukraine for the 5th time. You know, what's that? Those numbers are just funny money to us, you know, but it's like, that's clearly not sustainable. Like, if you just think about your personal budget or any business that you run, like, it doesn't work. You know, ultimately those things collapse.
Somebody explained to me,
the bills come due.
And somebody explained to me, maybe you know this actual figure. So people listening, fact check this. I thought I saw somewhere, and there's a credible source that I can't remember. That sounds so fishy. Trust me, it was a good source. But no, do your own research. Of that 60 billion, 40 billion actually comes back into the American military industrial complex.
Oh yeah, Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed.
Wait, your audio's out.
I said Boeing and.
You there?
Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you. Shoot.
Can you hear? Well, I didn't hit anything. What happened?
That's on my end.
Let me see here.
Maybe click out or something. I don't know.
Nothing. Check. Check.
There you go. There you go. Was that?
Is it?
Yeah, now I can hear you. I don't know what happened.
Now you can?
Yeah,
okay.
Good. Yeah, you're good. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I was just saying, it's like a big shell game. Like, you got your Raytheon and your Boeing and your Lockheed. Like, the money's all going to them. Like, because it's like they're incentivized for Ukraine to be destroyed, so that these are the American companies that are going to go in and rebuild Ukraine. But they're going to build them, and they're going to be in charge of it now. And Ukraine has an abundance of natural resources, like super fertile farmland, and they're ripe for industry, shipping, worldwide shipping, and all this, and which is the whole thing with Crimea, why that's important. But anyway, it's a shell game to take U.S. taxpayer dollars and put them in the pockets of the industrial war complex, like private companies that are getting richer, like Blackstone. And oh my gosh, I mean, listen, if people don't go down the rabbit hole a little bit, then you're just being a sucker. Like, you got to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. Like, you're getting suckered. And that's the thing. It works because somehow we think they're up to our good. Like, no, they're up to no good. Like, that should be your entry state into anything that our government's doing. You should be like, they're up to no good and I'm suspicious. That should be where you start.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you on that. And I have peeked behind that curtain, and I've talked about this on the podcast. I mean, you peek into the military-industrial complex, the relationship between wars that the United States either enters into or helps create. The things that I keep saying the things that the country now called the United States of America is involved in, and the financial kickbacks it gets, and why we support this war but oppose this one. And we support Ukraine because we want to help the underdog, and we had this tyrant Putin that is trying to take over the world. And if we don't help him stop Ukraine, he's going to come back for us, all these narratives and stuff. It's like, but then we don't talk about the U.S. backing of the Saudi ongoing genocide toward the Yemenites. I mean, even when I say that, most people probably know where Yemen is, and I don't no clue what you're talking about. Yeah, that doesn't hit the news because, well, there's financial gain, being on the side of Saudi Arabia. And if they're like, we want to go, we have an issue with these Yemenites, we're like, yeah, we'll make money off that, and then we just won't talk about it. And you just go on and on and on and on. I mean, there is. I'm rereading Stephen King's book Overthrow, where he talks about a few of the, I think it's around 80 U.S. backed regime changes where we overthrew some kind of usually democratically elected leader. A lot of these were during the Cold War when we suspected, well, this leader is, pro-communist. We need to get rid of him and install a pro-Western leader. But then it turns out that pro-Western leader is a tyrant towards his people, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people end up dying because of a pro-Western leader that the United States helped install. And this happened over and over and over and over. So yeah, you start looking into that, and it's like,
well, and it's until they speak out that we start to take them out, like Gaddafi.
Oh yeah.
Like Obama, everyone's Nobel Peace Prize winner. He took out Gaddafi in Libya. Well, you start going down a little bit of the rabbit hole there, and you start looking at some of the speeches Gaddafi was making.
Yeah, what were they? I don't know much about that one, actually.
Well, he was calling out the U.S. empire, and basically he was calling for Arab nations to unite against the U.S. But he was backed by U.S. interests to gain power. As were the Saudis, as were all of them. And so, but he was starting to say, hey, basically he's like, hey, these guys are using us, and the only way that we're going to stop them from doing it is to band together. That's oversimplifying what he's saying. And obviously this stuff's translated. He's speaking Arabic. But whatever. Like, you're like, okay, obviously he became a threat instead of an asset. And that's how they see him. You're like an asset or you're a threat, and there's no middle ground. Are you, and it's not about our way of life or they hate us for our freedom. It's about money. Yeah. It's always about money. And it's like, I've learned this. Like, you can have your editor bleep me, but there's no other way to say this. But people are totally cool what you do until you fuck with their money. You fuck with their money.
Yeah.
It's serious, and that's what it comes down to. They're like, oh yeah, you have a moral cause. And we're like, ultimately these people don't have their morality is second to their money. It's like, okay, you make a good moral case. I understand that. And they'll let you be. You start fucking with their money, assassinations start happening. And that's really all it ever comes down to, and I ain't got no money. I'm not a threat to anybody, and I'm just like,
you sound like the, what's his Oliver, what's the guy, the Richmond, North of Richmond.
Oh dude,
Anthony Oliver.
Dude, I know this is gonna out me in a weird way, but I went and saw him at the Ryman Auditorium here in Nashville.
Did you?
He sold that place out.
Oh, I bet he did.
It was so good.
Really?
I actually think he's a really good songwriter, but I also realized, wow, there were definitely extremists in the crowd that night. And I'm like, it's a little much for me.
What kind of, they had Confederate flags or what? Or
well, it wasn't that bad. They probably would have stopped that. But there was a fuck Joe Biden chant rang out throughout the Ryman that night. And he had to stop his song because it was very intense. And I'm like, oh man. And see, that becomes the other part of it where you're just kind of like, they make us choose one of these sides. And I'm like, man, I don't care. I mean, I know I am not. My disclaimer is I'm not an escapist. I want my feet grounded in the earth. I believe the earth is good. God made it. And I'm not saying this in an escapist way. But I am just passing through, and this is not my home. Now, this actual dirt might be my home in the kingdom come. I don't know. You get into eschatology on that. But I'm saying the way this world works and the way it's run, I'm just trying to get through it, man. I'm just trying to get to the other side.
What's going back to Oliver Anthony, and I don't know, he was like, everybody knew who he was for like 2 months, then kind of disappeared. But that's how social media works, though.
No,
right? I mean,
he hasn't.
He hasn't.
He's doing very well.
The phenomenon, the controversy or whatever.
Yes.
What was funny is, his song was taken to be kind of like, well, people tried to make it like anti-Democrat, and so did you see like the Republicans tried to like capitalize on him? Like, yeah, he's speaking for us. He's like, I'm not speaking for you, you bunch of elites. You're the same.
Yeah, he came out and said, I'm talking about you too.
Yeah. I thought that was,
which I love.
I thought that was classic. That was great. Yeah, so it doesn't sound like you're very either. If someone said, okay, Jay, between the Democrats and Republicans, which one would you side? Which one's better? Which one's worse? Trump or Biden? Which one's the lesser?
Yeah, they're the same.
Huh?
They're the same. There's so little difference that it doesn't matter. It's not worth articulating a difference. Like, they are the same. Like, if you zoom out a little bit, they would blur together and you wouldn't even, like, it's the same thing. Like, it's not.
Well,
it's a scam. It's a shell game.
Keep going.
That they have to make us think we have an option. That pacifies the public. To make you think you had a say, to make you think you had a voice. It just pacifies you. It keeps you from revolting by thinking you have a choice. So they pacify people by giving you two options that are basically the same and saying, well, you pick. And that's a democracy. It's not a democracy.
Real quick, what do you mean by same? Because, I mean, people are going to say, wait a minute. I mean, they have completely different views on all kinds of stuff, different policies, different...
Give me one example, and I'll tell you how they're the same. Give me one policy. I'll tell you how they're the same. Abortion, sure. All right? Where we think that there's a massive difference,
well,
right?
even that. Isn't Trump kind of fuzzy on that? Or, I don't know.
I know, right? But, my gosh, he's still, like, people won't budge off of him because that's obviously not the real thing. And they'll say, well, he got us the Supreme Court justices we needed to make it a state's issue or whatever. It's all, the target's always moving. And that's the thing. As long as they can keep that target moving. I mean, the Southern Baptist Convention getting involved with this stuff. I feel like there's a lot of people who feel a little icky about, like, they don't even like, okay, there are people like Russell Moore who are like against Trump from the start. But I'm like, even to say like, well, we got this thing we've been praying for. And now that it plays out, you're like, I'm not sure this is what we wanted. I'm not sure this is what we were advocating for through the 90s and the 2000s. Like, it's not quite what we thought, Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's because you're trying to use the government to legislate a morality that it's never going to be capable of doing. Like, you won a political battle, but spiritually you gained no ground. You gained no ground. The church gained no ground. The church took more damage than anything else. And they always justified it, say, but abortion. If you go through every election season, every 4 years, you're like, well, I'm a single issue voter. If you're even a little wishy-washy on abortion, then we can't support you. And I'm like, they gained your power and now you won. And now what? How's the church doing in America? Well, attendance is lower than ever. There's more skepticism than ever. There seems to be a spiritual resurgence in the world. Mm-hmm. Like, there are more people open to metaphysical realities than ever, searching for transcendental interactions. And yet they're not looking to the church for it, except for Russell Brand, who just got baptized.
Did he really?
But he did.
In the Church of England?
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Really? I've been following his journey a little bit. I didn't know he got baptized.
Oh, no. He's a confessing Christian now.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, actually.
I'm glad he's in the UK. And I'm glad he's not in America, because he would get phone calls from all the mega church, like, not mega church, but I'm thinking specifically like the Joel Osteens or whatever. They're trying to make him a pastor, a speaker, to, but the UK just doesn't play into that. They don't commercialize. Well, I mean, everybody does to some extent, but it's, Christian celebrityism isn't nearly as big of a thing over there as is here. So,
well, I am looking forward to if he ends up on like one of those UK podcasts, like
Unbelievable,
Justin Brierley or something like that. Yeah, Unbelievable, or that would be interesting. But anyway, all I'm saying is, like, boiling down what I'm saying, is what I've said many times before. The state always weakens the church. The church never strengthens the state. Like there was like I remember in like middle school youth group, there was an illustration. Maybe you had this happen too in your MacArthurite background. Sounds like it would have worked for that. But like the leader would put a chair in the middle of a circle, and it would get like the smallest person in the whole circle, say, stand on top of the chair. And then they get the biggest person. Or no, vice versa. I said that backwards. The biggest person on top of the chair, and then they get the smallest person down below. And said, okay, first, you on the chair, try to bring them up. And it's really hard to try to pull someone up on a chair. And then they get the small person, so the really strong person in the chair, say, okay, now try to bring them down. And it's like so easy because obviously you got gravity on your side, right? And it's like, that's how sin works. You know, like it's always easier to be pulled down into sin than to pull someone up out of sin. And I think of that now in the terms of the relationship with the church and the state. Like the state is always going to bring the church down, and the church can never bring the state up. Like, don't get in bed together. Like it's never advantageous for the mission of the church to use the state for anything. It's never advantageous.
Okay, what about this? Here's a counter argument that I've been wrestling with because I resonate with what you're saying. I mean, I wrote a book that said similar things, at least. What about the what's that book, Dominion? The Spider-Man. We got the same name as Tom Holland. Tom Holland. So not the Spider-Man Tom Holland, the author Tom Holland. Jamie Smith talks about this. A lot of political theologians. You know, the creators of the gospel, because of the church's impact on society throughout history. Therefore, we have even concept like, you know, equal worth for men and women, that slavery is immoral, that even the concept of democracy, we can come back to whether you think that we were living in an actual democracy, but the concept itself, you know, all these things are rooted in Christian values that society, at least many Western societies, embrace or say they embrace because of the church's influence. So, yeah, the church doesn't change the state, but it's certainly this is the argument, by engaging the state, let's say, maybe even being part of the state on some level, we have helped the world have better values that have embedded themselves into various Western democracies, is how the argument might go. What do you think about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a net positive. I think that the church is being the church. I think that the world that is not the church, the world that is an enemy, as described in the New Testament, but also the world that God gave his son for, they will see that's better. We like that. And so they'll adopt values. I mean, I think values in the Roman Empire shifted between the 2nd century and the 4th century. Like, I'm talking about pre-Constantine. Like, you even saw values changing. Like, it was not considered a moral good to care for the terminally ill, at least if it was contagious. You know, it's like, that's foolish. Like, no, you take care of yourself, you know. But then the Christians started doing it, and there are enough people who had a sister or a mother who got sick, and the only people who take care of them were Christians, that they're like, no, I think that might be good that they do this, you know? So it's things like that, but it's always the church over and against the state. It's never the church with the state. It's always like the church is its own entity that is showing a better way. And yes, of course, if the church does that well, then people are going to emulate it, you know? Now, the trick is to not let them use that to gain power for themselves, which is what Constantine did. He said, you know what? People are really starting to, there's a lot, the church is starting to become real popular. What if we just took over the church?
I just want to point out, you said that the church helped shape values in the Roman Empire before Constantine. So they did that without political power, because it wasn't until after Constantine, right, when they had political power. So this whole
Right.
idea of no, having some political power can be good. The church can use that to produce, good in the world, change values.
I think you got to keep it away from political power, though, is the thing. It's not about changing policies. It's not about changing laws. It's about being a presence in society. It's about changing civilization, and like moving humanity closer to God. The state's never going to do that. Have you read this book? I happen to have it right here, and it's exactly what we're talking about.
Oh, Rodney Stark, yeah. A long time ago. I need to reread it. It's been 10 years or so to 12. Probably.
I mean, I don't even think he's a Christian. I don't think he's a believer.
I think he is now. I think through studying the early church.
He may have become one. Yeah. But, I mean, he made the case for, basically, spoiler alert, the rise of Christianity was because that against oppression, they began to love people. They loved each other so well. That people found that attractive. Like, I want to be a part of a group that loves each other like that.
They influence the world by being the church.
Exactly. And so it changed the world because the world said, why do they have this and we don't? Why do they have such a tight-knit community that would self-sacrifice for one another? And because ultimately, like, that's like ingrained in our humanity is a need for belonging and community, where, even if you're like, evolutionarily, I guess is the right word. Like, we need a tribe where we're biologically predetermined to need to associate. And so, or I don't know if you read Stanley Grant's, but he wrote the book Created for Community.
Oh yeah.
Like we're like that spiritually, it's in our spiritual DNA too, that we need to belong to a group of other people.
Yeah.
And ultimately that group of people, which is the church, is in a community with God, who is a community 3 in 1. Yeah. So it's like ingrained in the structure of the universe and in God's very person that we need community. And so when the church is being that, it's very attractive to the world when you're loving each other. So well, and especially in circumstances where it's like nobody cares about me, nobody's out for me, nobody wants my good. But man, these people seem to all genuinely want the good of the other over more than their own good. And so yes, it will change society just by being the church. But as soon as that starts becoming like, oh, you know what? The state can deliver that. No, they can't. It's a false promise. They're trying to unite us behind these principles or these countries or these arbitrary borders and say, what makes you one are the fact that you were born within these lines that don't exist in nature, that just on the map we drew, and it's like, that's a false tribe. That's not a real connection,
But Jay, if I had the ring, I would use it for good. That was at the Exiles conference. That was Brian Zahn's political talk. He built it all around the Ring of Power and how even the purest of the pure, the Hobbit.
Tolkien's so good.
Oh, even the Hobbit. And he even says there was that glimpse in the book, not in the movie, but in the book, when even Samwise, the purest of the purest, group of people, was even started to get a tiny bit of temptation,
That's exactly it. And even though I think Tolkien was an Anglican, there are some writings, there's some letters where he said he bends towards anarchy. And he clearly clarified, I think, it's like, see that you have to do that. Like, there's a concept of anarchy, which is just saying, I serve no state master, versus like chaos in the world and like revolution. And I'm like, no, that's not, Tolkien was not talking about that kind of anarchy. He's just saying, I have no allegiance to state, and I think he was definitely sympathetic towards the concept of Christian anarchy. We've talked about Jacques Ellul before. Oh, check this book out. I just got this in the mail. I keep showing, I'm here where all my books are. It's Leo Tolstoy.
Oh, he was a Christian anarchist, Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah, Christianity and Patriotism.
Oh,
so
wow. I've never even heard of that one. Wow.
Halfway through that.
Is it good?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because he's describing like a scenario that sounds crazy to me. It's like the the French. The occasion for rioting was that there was some sort of political parade of an alliance between the French and the Russians, which are traditional enemies. I don't know. He uses that as a spinning off point. It was like, basically, he's just like, this is all bullshit. So,
yeah, can you tell us about Dorothy Day? I barely even knew who she. I mean, I know who she was and everything, but didn't knew hardly anything about her until you, in one of our offline conversations, you used her as an example of somebody who did produce a lot of good in society, but was adamantly, I think, opposed to like getting involved in the empire directly.
Yeah, she was ethically convinced to not vote. She never voted. And she was a self-described Christian anarchist, but you're talking about like influencing society and changing society for the better. Like she ran like I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Catholic
Workers,
some sort of Catholic social thing, which helped impoverished youth or orphans or things like that. I'd have to brush up on the actual thing, but it's like it grew to be really influential and big, and to where they did actually have a voice politically because they were seen as a positive in the societies. I think she was from New York. Yeah. See, you're putting me on the spot, and I probably need to verify my facts. But yeah, I mean, but in the concept of, it's not escapism. It's not saying let the world burn. It's saying no. I want to make the world better. The state can't do that, so we're going to work. And yes, if the state wants to give us funds, we'll take them. If the state wants to pass laws that help it be easier for us to do what we think is good, let them do it.
Let them do it, or try to get those laws passed.
Yeah, see, I think there's a level where you could try to get those laws passed. That's where this is the part of the debate where people say Wilberforce. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it's like, yeah, well, obviously the only people that could abolish slavery were governments that allowed it to take place in the first place. So, I think it was not for a moral good. I think it is because it was actually, the slave trade was no longer being cost effective for the British Empire. And I think that's really ultimately why they didn't end slavery. They ended the slave trade. And since they ruled the seas at the time, they were able to stop the trade of slaves, but they didn't end slavery. And that didn't happen for a while longer. So, and I think that, we get to put a feather in our cap morally. This guy Wilberforce won't shut up about it, but like, it's actually not cost effective anymore. We can actually probably save money. The East India Company, I think, and they're just kind of like, yeah, let's just go ahead and abolish the slave trade. I think too many competitors had arisen, and they didn't have the monopoly on the market anymore. So they eliminated the market. Like, I hate to be cynical, but that is how things work. It's just, they don't work for altruistic reasons. People don't pass laws because they're good. They pass them so that they can protect their money.
But regardless, the slave who now is not a slave anymore is like, I don't,
absolutely,
whatever motivation you had, I'm not a slave. Like, it's, so
absolutely. But I just think you just need to temper that when you go say, let's change these laws. Let's understand, like, if you're going to go try to change the law, you have to appeal to their base nature. Like, here's, like, if you really want to get a law passed, show them how it's better, how they'll make more money doing this. Yeah. That's what you should do. Don't appeal to their morality, because they're not built for that. They're built for money. So here's how you can gain more money and more power by doing this thing. And that's, in that way, the church is subversive, because we know that true power isn't in money, isn't in political power. True power is in service and self-sacrifice. True power is cruciform. But that's a secret we know that they don't get. And so we will use their own thirst for power and money against them to do more of God's will in the world. But that has to be the approach. It can't be like, well, obviously this is good. Why wouldn't you want to do something good? They don't. They want to make money and gain more power. So you have to use it. If the church is to influence the state, it is by manipulating them. We must manipulate the state if we're going to, and we must realize the church is actually more powerful than the state. Like, we have a greater authority and a greater power, and we can use them. I'm not saying don't use the state. You know, I mean, the argument's always made about the Pax Romana and how that facilitated the spread of the faith throughout the Roman Empire. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm here to use, and I've been in governments that have varying degrees of allowance for missionary activity. You know, we're going to use whatever's there. If you're in India, we're going to use your whatever laws you got. If we're in China, we're going to use what you got. In America, we're going to use that too. But it can't be any different. I remember you telling me, it's like, the people who understand your thesis about this the most seem to be people with missionary experience.
Yeah. Most missionaries don't think.
Why don't you elaborate on that? Why don't you elaborate on that?
Hey friends, if Theology in the Raw has blessed or challenged you in any significant way, would you consider supporting the show financially? You can do so through Patreon at patreon.com/Theology in the Raw. All the information is in the show notes. You can support the show for as little as $5 a month. And in doing so, you get access to all kinds of different premium content. And most of all, you just get access to the Theology in the Raw community. We have all kinds of awesome chats and messages back and forth. And it means the world to us that you support the show. As the show has grown, so have all the expenses and all the work that goes into pulling it off. So again, if you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Theology in the Raw. And I just want to thank the people that are already supporting the show. Thank you so much for keeping this show not only going, but also thriving. So patreon.com/Theology in the Raw. So if you're, so going back to my book, Exiles, and just my whole kind of view of what is a Christian political identity in the world. Well, I often say, like, my starting point is I am a member of Christ's global multi-ethnic kingdom that has been spread or exiled among the nations. That's when you ask me, what do you think about immigration? That's my starting point. I have brothers and sisters in Mexico, in Bolivia, in all, that's my starting point. My primary political identity is in the global kingdom of God. So we don't have, what do you say? What about our borders? I'm like, we don't have borders. What about our troops? We don't have troops. We have missionaries. Maybe those are our troops. So even using the plural we, our, in terms of my global Christian identity as a political identity, that's my primary starting place. Then I do treat the nation I'm living under just like the Jewish exiles did in Babylon. You know, how would the 6th century Jewish exiles feel if there were too many Assyrians coming into Babylon? I think they would just have a different, I don't know, like they'd probably be like, well, how can we feed them? Are they hungry? They wouldn't ask. They would, their primary identity what shouldn't have been like Babylonian. It should have been, we've been exiled here. We're seek to go to the city, but like, this is not, like you said, this is not our home. This is not our primary identity. So all that to say, missionaries that are, I'm talking specifically people living in a different cultural context. It's not where they were born in. They get that. They understand naturally what it's like to feel kind of like not quite at home in the country you're living in. And I just think, when I start talking about living in exile in Babylon, there's like, well, of course. I mean, and most missionaries, when they come back to America, visit America, I think they do, most of them at least, they're pretty suspicious about political idolatry and the patriotism and just even the way Americans are perceived around the globe, having lived as you have, lived in other countries and stuff. It's like, our reputation is not always the best, people like America, they like Hollywood, the movies and stuff, but they always kind of like, I don't know, you guys are always the loudest tourists. You always demanding to get your way. And you bring your American values, You just think the whole world should be run like it's run in America, and it's just not the way. That's just not true. But yeah,
right, yeah. I mean, and I think that listen, we're all guilty of different forms of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and
I actively try to find those in myself to reconcile them as much as possible, because I hate contradictions. Mm-hmm. And it is telling for people to have this American political ideology and then be very pro Great Commission, which, and to have this every tribe and nation mentality. And it's like, well, from a missionary perspective, you break it down into people groups. You want to present the gospel to different people groups, and you want to see the gospel flourish into church growth, church planting movements, CPMs they talk about in unreached groups. Well, many of these unreached groups are illegally crossing our border, which makes it a lot cheaper for us to reach them. If you're having a Great Commission mindset, you would see this as an opportunity.
The nations are coming here.
And the nations are coming here. You don't have to raise $5,000 a head to go over there.
But some of them are bad people, Jay. Like, well,
aren't we all? That's why they need the gospel.
But that we missionaries, we have that very ethnocentric assumption, like we need to go reach the bad people. It's like, when the bad people come, and again, I'm saying quote unquote bad people.
Right, they come to your backyard. We don't like it as much.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's it's one thing to go to China illegally, because you can't say you're there to do mission work, which, I mean, come on. I mean, it's like you go for a different reason, but if you're a true disciple of Christ, you're always doing mission work wherever your feet are. Yeah. So, you're just like, well, we expect the threat, but then you want to come home and not have the threat. No, there are antagonistic forces to the gospel wherever you go. It is a real farce that people think that somehow America is protected from antagonism towards people of faith. And I think that's the essence of this Christian nationalism, is to create a safe place to be a Christian. Like there's a place that is built, that is created, where it's okay to be a Christian without When has Christianity ever flourished without opposition? Mm-hmm. It's like it never does well. It never does well without opposition. It goes into moralism or, just lackadaisical cultural Christianity. It never does well without opposition. There always has to be. And the thing that I think we need to continue to remind ourselves is, God doesn't need the church to do what he's doing. God is working in the world to accomplish them. God is on mission. God is dynamic. God is active. He is working to reconcile his creation to himself. The church gets to participate. But if the church doesn't participate, it doesn't stop him. And so he'll use whatever means are necessary. And there are times where it has looked like the state has been aligned with those purposes. You can look in scripture where it's like Assyria was God's sword or whatever. It looks like on the surface that God is using this. God's going to use whatever. He is actively working to reconcile creation to himself. We get to participate. That needs to be our mentality. But our allegiance to a state compromises our ability to participate in God's work. Because it is fundamentally, and this is where I go extreme with it, it is fundamentally blasphemy. You are saying that there is another who can do what God can do. You're saying there's another entity, a powerful entity in the world who can do what God alone can do. And so back to where you disagree with me, that's where I say voting is a sin. You're giving away your autonomous choice to an entity called the state to accomplish good in the world, which it's never going to be capable of doing. Like voting is saying, I think this other, you're giving your power away. You're giving your autonomy and authority away. We must surrender only to Christ. We must surrender only to him and say, your will be done. We give ourselves completely to you. We don't look to another. We only look to you, and we trust in your way, however you'll do it.
Isn't that a false dichotomy? Can't you trust in God and also vote for certain laws, certain people that even if you say they're all basically bad, but some are worse than others? I'm
willing to allow for that. Like, I'm not going to be dogmatic about that. Like,
oh, really?
Okay. I mean,
but you still call it a sin. So you would say, like, I think it's a sin, but
the way everybody talk, the way most people do it, I would say the way how you described it, sure, I'll go for that. But if you're doing it in a subversive way, like over and against the state, like, I could see that as a possibility, but that's never what happens. Christians get turned into voting blocks for other interests, other powerful entities to serve their own interests, not the interests of the church, not the interests of the gospel, to serve their own interests. So you are giving them yourself, you're making yourself a voting block to give them power. And they used you. And people don't like to acknowledge that they've been suckered. It's humiliating. But we all have been suckered. We've all been suckered by the politicians, by the parties, by the people who made us promises to do what we think is right. And they never do. It never works out. Like, don't give away your power. Like, the Holy Spirit has indwelt us. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead now lives in us. And you're going to give that away by voting for your political candidate? Like, we don't need them. We don't need the state to accomplish good in the world. We don't need them.
So they've
convinced us we need them.
So and we
don't.
Is not voting for you almost a symbolic gesture? Like, is it?
It's an act of allegiance to Christ. Like, my actively not voting is a surrender to Christ. It's saying, I do have this vote. I lay it down at the foot of the cross. It's no longer mine. It's something that I surrender. Like, that individual rights and liberty and all that. I say, I lay all that down. I surrender to you as my king.
It still just doesn't, I don't know. Still not quite convinced. I hear that.
What if Jesus was an actual king? But think of it this way. What if Jesus was an actual king and you lived in a democratic republic and that's where your citizenship lied? And he said, I want you to be a part of my kingdom, but you must surrender all former allegiances. But what if he was an actual physical king, which I believe he will be?
I think he is.
I think he is and will be.
Yeah, is and will be. Already not yet. But I mean, that it just, again, seems like a false dichotomy that you can't give your allegiance. I think you can't give dual allegiances, but is voting necessarily an allegiance? Or is it I think
you have to hold your citizenship loosely. And I think Paul was a good example of this because he was a Roman citizen. But he never went around talking about it. He didn't even bring it up until he needed it for the mission.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, by the way, I do have this legal document that says you can't kill me. I am legally entitled to appeal to the emperor. Right. And he used that because he knew that the Spirit was leading him to get to Rome, and that was the way to get to Rome. So, I mean, I'm not saying go renounce your American citizenship and surrender your passport. I'm not saying that at all. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying the attitude of our heart must be one of surrender. And I think some people, that when you call out something that people don't want to let go of, then you found an idol, right? It's like the rich young ruler. Jesus told him the one thing, he obeyed all the law. He obeyed the Torah, he did all this. He's like, well, give up your wealth. He couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So when you find the thing that people won't give up, then you found their idols. And when people say, I can't give up my vote, well, why not?
Well, I don't think, wait, hold on. I don't think people would say, maybe if somebody is clutching to their vote in that kind of idolatrous sense or whatever, then yeah, sure. But I think some people are just like, my vote can contribute to some good in the world if they, and this is where I would push back, like if they think that one candidate is clearly less worse than the other. That's where I would push back and say,
I think you think too highly of people.
That
I just say nobody's.
Maybe I just hang out with different people, man. maybe a bunch
so.
of maybe down there in the South, man. Maybe that's the difference. I don't know.
that actually probably. Although Boise's kind of like the South of the North, right?
It's like Texas with mountains, basically. Your best, but you didn't really articulate what I think your best argument against voting. I said this at Exiles, by the way. People, I got the question. A question came up: do you vote? To me. And I don't mind saying my position. I don't go out and advertise it just because it's just, I don't know. Sometimes I get enough trouble as it is. I don't need to go searching for trouble. And when you say you don't vote, some people get really upset. But I don't vote. But I don't think it's a sin to like. I'm not. Could I ever vote in the future?
It's a provocative way of saying it. To be clear, it's just a way to get people to engage with the idea.
Would you vote?
It's not like
would you ever vote libertarian? Like if Ron Paul back in the day had a chance at being president, who was basically advocating for all the stuff we're talking about, is a very libertarian. I mean, wouldn't you want a Ron Paul or Rand Paul instead of all the other options? Like,
well, I did in those days. I was super on the Ron Paul train, and I think opened my mind to a lot of things. But like, there's still something missing in his theology. You can see that you get to a point with like a libertarianism and my affinity for libertarianism is this. I think the government that is least obtrusive is best for the church. Like, the church is better able to accomplish its mission with the fewest obstacles. That's what I think. There's always going to be opposition. However, if, we had more autonomy as a people, then the church would not be as restricted. I just said, board meeting where we're trying to get this guy from Uganda to come in the United States to talk about the ministry that we help fund. And it's like basically impossible. Because of the laws and, it's so locked down. He's not going to get a visa. I mean, I basically just said, guys, we might be wasting our breath here. This guy's not going to get in the U.S. Like, it's so restrictive, And so libertarianism is just like, hey, like, as long as you do no harm, let people do as they see fit. I would rather a government with open borders that says, as long as you're not doing harm, it's like, let's have the fewest laws possible. Well, that's going to facilitate the church, because the church is subversive by nature. And I think we forget that. Like, the church is, as big as the church gets, it's still fundamentally kind of an underground movement. And it always will be until the return of Christ. It's an underground movement.
How about this? So libertarian, and I don't identify as libertarian.
I don't either, to be clear.
Well, I resonate with a lot of, one of the biggest things I resonate with is all the stuff we've been talking about is they're very anti-American military industrial complex. They're very much always talk about American foreign policy and all the self-interest and all that stuff. So again, in theory, this would never happen because the CIA would take them out. Right. But if you had like a Ron Paul in Washington who drastically cuts military spending, ends the military industrial complex, ends up, I would say, people would disagree with me, I would say probably save millions of lives around the world based on U.S. involvement and regime changes and all this stuff. Like, wouldn't that be good? That's like saving millions of lives of people, in my opinion, if you expose the military industrial complex and actually do something about it. Like, could a vote like, here's my question, twofold. Could that not be a good vote? And if you say yes, then a lot of other people are going to say, well, that's why I vote here because of abortion. That's why I vote here because of healthcare. That's why I vote.
Yeah, it's always the other thing.
They're always going to have some moral, like,
exactly. There's always more to it. There's always more to it than just the one good thing that you want to accomplish. There's more that comes with it. I'll give you a better, for instance. Like, I think probably the thing that will course correct our nation and maybe even our world the most, would be the elimination of this industrial war complex, where it's just like if we could keep these deep state agencies and these warmongering entities like Boeing and Lockheed from basically running all policies, that would be that would be a real good, I think. It wouldn't fix everything, but it would be a reset that is necessary. Well, I actually believe that RFK Jr. would do that. I don't think it's talk. I think they killed his dad. I think they killed his uncle. What's more important, he thinks they did, which means he would be serious about dismantling it. And the way he talked, I'm like, that would be a net good in the world. And a part of me goes, I could vote for him. There's many things I disagree with him about, but I'm like, I could vote for that because I think that is probably the biggest and most important thing happening right now, is this constant warmongering because of this deeply entrenched by many decades state that's constantly promoting constant war. And I think he would end that.
Real quick, I have this before I forget.
I can't get myself to vote for him.
But when you argue against voting, you seem to do so from more a theological standpoint. But now it sounds like it's more pragmatic. Like it sounds almost like I don't vote because at the end of the day, you're not getting it at the roots. So you're just like
I will say that's an addendum. I think it's spiritual first.
Okay.
Second, your vote, you don't have a vote. You don't have a vote. Your vote doesn't count for anything. Your vote doesn't mean anything. Your vote is perpetuating an illusion that we're in a democracy. It's like, let's be real here.
So you would say, okay, defend the claim that we don't live in a democracy.
Well, first of all, I'd like to see someone who claims that we do, because we don't. But you might say that we live in a republic, a representative republic, right? Okay, so we get to vote for the people who speak for us. And even the most diehard American patriot would have to admit that the special interests are represented more than the regular voters. So you may vote for a guy to represent you in Congress, and yet the special interests are going to get to him, and he's going to say, well, I represent them too in their interests, And since they are basically funding him, that politician is going to pick them over your interest, because no one agrees. We don't all have the same interests. So how does a representative decide which interest to advocate for? Probably the ones paying him. And that's how it works. That's how the sausage gets made. We're not represented, period. And so that's not a democracy.
So it is a republic, not a democracy, you'd say?
I mean, no, I don't think anyone says that it's democracy. And we can get into the Socrates concept of how democracy is actually an evil. I mean, the old democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. No, you hadn't heard that?
No.
Yeah, that's a democracy.
Well, but when people say Trump is a threat to democracy, you always hear that. They assume that we enter democracy. I mean, people do. Bluster. Yeah, and people do believe.
They say it all the time.
Yeah.
It's propaganda. No one's stopping to think what that means.
Yeah.
Or what it doesn't mean. What democracy are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, I will say this though. I mean, I do think that as of yet, we have more say than other countries. Now, maybe it's an illusion they've given us. At least in China, you don't have a say. In some ways, it might be better to just. There's no pretense. There's no illusion. We know what the situation is. You're in charge. We're not. Got it.
Mm-hmm. And
we basically function like that. I think the 2020, 2021 showed us that we basically function like that, but there is some semblance of, if you get enough people to raise enough of a fuss, you can get the powers that they don't want that heat.
Right.
They don't need to sacrifice the political capital if you can get enough people being loud enough. So, and that is true in America in a way it's not true in other countries.
Or I mean, you have like, so, I mean, I know free speech is how free speech, there's laws and regulations and all that stuff. But at the same time, you do have, I mean, few countries where you can have people just openly mock and criticize the leader, and you don't, right. You get away with that. I mean, look at like how, look, every late night talk show, can make fun of Trump, criticize, and they get, they're not taken out. Now you start poking the military industrial complex.
That's what I'm saying. You don't fuck with their money.
Yeah. I here on voting, I got a buddy. See if you've ever heard this one. I have a buddy that always votes for the person running against the one who's already in power. He just votes for change of power because for somebody, he says, I think if somebody stays in power, that ends up getting more and more corrupt. So I'm just going to keep voting for.
I agree with that, except for I saw this on Twitter. I can't remember who shared it. I wish I could give credit, but someone said that they think that every president is actually like wants to do what they say. Mm-hmm. They don't mean to go against their campaign promises, but then they get into the White House and they have the talk where the agency heads all come and talk to them, and they're like, oh, damn, and then all of a sudden, I mean, like George Bush, like I totally believed George Bush in 2000 when he was running. He was anti-war. He really was.
George Bush
he sounded like it. Yeah, I believed it. I believed him. And yet it's almost like he gets into power and then they give him the talk. And then 9/11 happens and the whole thing's out the window. And he's like, yeah, do whatever you got to do. We're going to war or whatever. So, but against not the people who attacked us, which is still bizarre to this day. Somehow the American public talked themselves into this war. They're like, wait a minute, they're not the ones who attacked us. Why are we going to war with them? It's like still this weird cognitive dissonance. Like it was this sense of somebody's going to pay for what you did to us. And I guess it's you. That's what we did.
And we're going to, we need to bomb them because they're jealous of our freedom.
It doesn't matter who you vote for. The people in power are the people who don't get elected. Like the people who keep their power are not voted on. And so there are entities, and that's where you get this deep state conspiracy kind of stuff. But there's legitimately people who are career in this.
Yeah.
They don't get voted on. They get appointed and they go administration after administration after administration, and they're the ones who actually are in power.
Well,
that's part of why I say it doesn't matter who you vote for. The people in power don't change.
I just had on, I don't know if you listened to it yet, Angela McArdle. She's one of the libertarian, I had her on the podcast. You got to listen. It's exactly what she said. She says most of the people in Washington that are controlling the country were not voted on. There's exactly, a whole, it was all in the deep state. She is all. So
tell me more about democracy.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the people in charge aren't voted on, but tell me we're in a democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, it's a farce, man. I mean, I don't even want to argue with anyone about that. Like, if you think this, you're so disillusioned. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's like you're trying to tell me the sky is yellow. And I'm like, it's clearly blue. Like, what are you talking about? I don't even want to argue with you about this. Like, you're living in some sort of false reality that this Alice in Wonderland kind of rabbit hole here that you're like, what? That's not the world. That's not how things work.
Yeah.
Like you're so out of touch. Like you've been sold a line of propaganda and you're like, we got to vote because it's a democracy. And it's like, when has anything ever changed from voting? They give you crumbs here and there to keep the illusion going.
Well, unless people think a certain president is clearly way better or the other one's way worse than another one. And
every 4 years, they keep thinking that. They keep thinking it keeps working. We're suckers, man. We're children. We're easy to manipulate. It's like, and we keep falling for the same damn tricks. I don't know why we're this way, but I want out. And I guess for me personally, that's the thing. I don't want to get suckered into a candidate that lets me down again. Like You know, I'm just like, no, I'm just not going to vote at all.
What happens with,
I withdraw from the process.
Okay, so somebody could say, it sounds like you're so negative on this country. Why don't you go move somewhere else? Well, you know, and you'll see that like you have it a lot better than
I've thought about it.
How come you haven't done
it? You know, practical reasons more than any. I mean, honestly, you know, most of the people I know live in this country. I do know lots of people who live in other countries. I do think that some other country, I had this experience. We were in Senegal and, we were promoting a concert, and we were in the back of this truck that had a loudspeaker. We were blaring music, blaring rock and roll, and just throwing flyers out. And I was just commenting. I was like, man, this would not work in the U.S. And this Senegalese guy, he says, is this illegal? And I go, yeah, it's like littering. It's like public noise. It's like there's so many laws we would be breaking right now. He goes, in America, you are not free. We are free. He's like, and then he says, if I want to take a piss, I go take a piss. Can you do this in America? And I'm like, no, you can't just take a piss in public. He's like, you are not free. We are free. And I'm like, yeah, there's an argument to be made there. There's something to be said about that, you know? And I'm like,
I'm pretty thankful that urinating in public is not legal.
Yeah. Same. But I'm just saying there's something to that, though, this idea. And the reality is their governments just don't have as much power over their people, so they can't enforce it. It may be illegal. They just can't enforce that. In where there are weaker governments. But there is some appeal to me in living in a country that has a weak government. Now, you go the other side of that. I mean, like Zimbabwe. I don't know if I'd want to live in Zimbabwe right now. They have a very weak government. But it's chaos. I don't know if I want to go live in chaos. So I'm not, you know, there's a middle ground there. I think.
I think you can. I think you can. I mean, everything you're saying, it's a false democracy, military industrial complex, corruption, on and on and on. And you can affirm all of that and still say, but yeah, there are many other countries that are even worse. It's the same kind of system.
Here's the problem too with the go live in another country, and you know, you have enough friends who live abroad or are from other countries that you probably have heard this too. It's like everything America does affects us too.
Right.
So it's like America is the one country that our policies don't just affect our country, like go live in another country. It's not like you can escape what happens in America. There's nowhere you can move where what happens in America won't affect you. You know? So it's like there's nowhere you can escape this empire. This empire is pervasive. And our empire is not, it's a new kind of empire. We haven't colonized nations. We've colonized economies. So they need us for their money to work. And so we've colonized them monetarily, and all of our policies are going to affect them.
And we also,
and they know it.
And we also have 750 military bases in 80 different countries. So yeah, we haven't colonized them technically, but we.
It's to protect our economic interests.
Right.
I mean, that's why we expand our military, is to protect. That's what the Constitution actually allows for, is to protect the economic interest of the nation. We've just really been liberal with how we apply that.
Right.
You know? And again, don't fuck with the money, man.
All right. I'm gonna. You still have time? I'm gonna change.
Oh yeah, we're good.
I'm gonna change massive gears, but I'm gonna make our next conversation, which is gonna be about the Los Angeles Dodgers, an appendix to this episode. So the official conversation has ended now. If you're not into baseball or the Dodgers, then you're free to leave. But I want to talk to Jay online about the Dodgers. I've always wanted to do this, actually. I've actually wanted to do a whole podcast episode talking baseball with you. So
I have thought about mentioning to you that we should just start a separate podcast where we talk about the Dodgers. There's not a good Dodgers podcast.
Mookie Betts.
Huh?
He's got a podcast, Mookie Betts.
Well, I know, but it's not Dodgers specific.
It's not a Dodgers. No. Is there not?
I mean, like Dodgers fandom. Yeah. There's not a good one. I've listened to a couple, and I'm like, it's pretty lame. But like my football fandom and my college fandom, like there are good podcasts out there for content and discussion. It's not a good Dodgers one.
Interesting.
In fact, the only like legit baseball one, I love John Boy. You follow John Boy?
No, I don't do any sports podcasts. Not on purpose. Just
John Boy's on mostly social media, his clips and stuff. They do a podcast and stuff too.
Oh.
Dude, he's incredible. He's a Yankees fan, but it's good content.
Really? Okay.
It's really good. J-O-M, not John.
John
J-O-M.
John Boy. Okay. I mean, I've got a lot of Instagram accounts that have baseball clips and stuff. But so how are you feeling about this year? I mean, this is for those, and if somebody is still listening and doesn't really know baseball, doesn't know Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers team this year has been described as one of, if not the best teams in the history of the sport. Let's start there. Do you think that at least the best lineup in the history? I mean, 27 Yankees is obviously up there.
I was going to say, like, you're talking about offensively for sure.
I know our pitching.
Yeah, I mean, the 5 through 9 hitters aren't holding up their end of that claim right now, but they're starting to a little bit more.
But they changed that a little bit. I mean, Rojas he's been hitting pretty good, and Pages obviously coming in.
Pages might be good. We're not sure yet. Andy Pages might be good.
Yeah.
Outman's not, he's not doing great. Muncie's hitting around 250, but I expected a few more homers.
Yeah.
But Kike's on fire right now, but he started off super in a slump.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a long baseball season. These things will even out. We'll probably be able to make a better assessment in a couple months. But as far as best of all time, the way Mookie's playing right now,
insane.
And to have Freddie behind him and then Shohei behind him, and then Will Smith's batting what, like 370?
Like 350 like to have those or something,
top 4? Like,
yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean, that's insane.
And Freddie isn't even at the top of his game right now. And he's still hitting.
Slumping for Freddie. He's hitting like 290.
Yeah.
It's like a slump for him.
Yeah. So are you overall, I mean, but the bottom of the lineup hasn't done well, but they're picking it up. Top of the lineup couldn't really be doing much better. The pitching, I mean, Yamamoto, I mean, if you take away that first game where he gave up 5 runs in the first inning, his ERA would be like 150 or something.
I mean, you tell me what team right now has a better 1-2 than Glasnow, Yamamoto, which are the 2 pitchers we picked up. I don't know that anybody's got a better 1-2.
Who are the Yankees? They got Cole and
I mean, Garrett Cole is on Tommy John now.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal.
So
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I've watched some Yamamoto, but I just see the stats. So he gave up 7 hits, no earned runs last time. Was he throwing good? Did you see him? Like, was he making?
Yeah.
Does he make hitters like kind of silly? Like I've seen him do that. And it's like, man, it's when he's on.
He had more swing and miss the game before last. But like he's starting to get a feel for the major league zone.
Okay.
It's back-to-back outings of 6 innings, no earned runs.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like back-to-back. Yeah. And I'm like, he's looking good, man. He's looking good. Glasnow looks dominant.
He does. Yeah, he does.
The only thing you worry about him is injury.
Yeah.
You worry like he's gonna, how long can he keep this up? Bueller's gonna be back.
I'm not sure about
Dustin
Bueller.
Might be back.
I sent you the Vox. What do you think?
Yeah,
I mean, so Bueller is a 98, 99, 100 mile an hour fastball guy pre-surgery. You
build up to that. Over time, I mean, every pitcher in spring training is 5-10 miles an hour below what they're going to be after they get built up.
Because they were clocking him at like 94, I think, in the minor leagues.
No, he'll hit 98.
Really?
They stretch him out. Yeah, okay. If they stretch him out, I'm not worried about that. If he's hitting 94, I haven't seen the stats, but if he's hitting 94 now after this slow buildup, they stretch him out a little bit. He'll get back up there.
So do you think when he's rehabbing and he has like 6 or 7 starts in the minor leagues, are you saying he's not he's not trying to dominate. He was giving up
100%.
several runs. He was getting hit around a bit. I mean, not.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. He's just trying to hit his spots.
They're working on specific pitches. Okay. Yeah, they're working on specific. Like it's like if you're in the minors and you're working on your fastball. Well, every hitter knows a fastball is coming because they know you're working on your fastball. Okay. Well, it's like I don't care. I'm working on my fastball.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I'm not super concerned about that. I will say though that several years ago, probably about 10 years ago, when Chattanooga was a affiliate, AA affiliate of the Dodgers, I think it wasn't very long that they were, but Clayton Kershaw got sent on a rehab assignment, and I drove down and I saw him pitch. Oh my gosh, he was making those kids look silly. It was amazing. I was sitting right behind home plate, really? And just their knees were buckling on that curveball. They didn't know they'd never seen anything like that. So, I mean, when you are legitimately dominant, I think, yeah. And you know what's weird to me is we don't think about this, but there is a significant chasm between AAA and the majors. Like we think it's just like, oh, it's probably pretty close. But like, you look at like Jackson Holiday. I was thinking about this the other day.
He got like 1 or 2 hits or something.
He struggled in the majors, but he was raking in AAA. Yeah. They called him up. He got like 2 hits in like 12 games, and they sent him back down. Well, guess what he started doing? Raking again. Really? He's killing AAA pitching, really? But he can't hit major league. So he's in that weird gray area, but which is much wider than we think. You know,
it's not like, just one
think
step.
About it. Yeah, think about if we sent James Outman down to AAA.
Yeah, you'd crush it.
You know, he's struggling in the majors, but he'd go to AAA and he'd be dominant probably. You know, it's like, man, there's this weird kind of, and it makes you appreciate those truly dominant, like what Mookie's doing right now.
Oh gosh,
it makes you really appreciate that.
Mookie is just, I mean, even little things like laying off a 1-2 slider that's 2 inches outside, like he just won't swing. Like, you know, he went a streak like I don't know how many games without a strikeout. Like that, that's when you know you can't put him on because you have Shohei next, so you have to pitch to him. But if you throw a ball, he's not going to swing. You throw a strike, doesn't matter what it is, he's going to get barrel on it. I mean,
I was like starting to be like, oh, he's not doing as well because he's not hitting home runs like he started off with. But then you like look at his OPS is still like 11 something, and I'm like, oh, yeah, his OPS is way up. His slugging's off the charts. He may not be hitting homers, but he's hitting gap shots, doubles, whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just like if he keeps this up even a little, he's MVP this year.
I mean, even if he hits ends up hitting like 330, which is probably realistic. I mean, no one's gone on the days and guys are hitting over 350. I mean, except for that Reyes dude. But I mean, 330 is our new 350. Like back in our day, we had Tony Gwynn hitting 380, had Wade Boggs hitting 375. Right. That's just, those days are gone, right? I mean, I feel like 330 is the new 360. So
I think so.
I don't know why, but
I mean, they want more power numbers. That's why they want more slugging. And so you swing harder, means you have less time for contact. If you take a little off your swing, the percentage of contact goes up. But people aren't trying to be contact hitters anymore. Yeah. And that's mostly why you're not seeing that. But I mean, Freddie Freeman says his approach is always to hit doubles. He's like, I'm just trying to hit the ball hard in the gap.
Yep.
It's like, he's like, I've never tried to hit home runs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the left center gap. That kind of inside out swing, hitting the ball middle in, and he hits it to left center.
And his swing is so goofy. I would never teach people to swing how he swings. It almost looks like a half golf swing.
I don't like his. Okay, like, people always rave about his swing. Same thing. I don't.
It's like a chop. No, you don't. That's not.
It's a weird.
It works for him, but you don't teach that swing. Like that's his hands are high. The bat has a bat path that kind of goes down and around. It works for him. So it does, obviously it's working, but. Versus like Shohei is the new swing model. Like he swings so hard and yet somehow makes so much contact because his bat path is level. The way he turns his hips, his bat path is level. So his bat's in the strike zone longer because of his bat path, but he swings with such ferocity. It's just, traditionally been like discouraged because that's like a guaranteed strikeout.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't strike out that much. I mean, he strikes out, but I mean, he doesn't strike out. He's not like Joey Gallo or nothing.
Yeah,
you know?
At least he's not like your boy Gallo, man. He's an all or nothing. I think he's got more home runs and singles.
He is. He's like he's a big guy too, and he puts his whole body into it, but he strikes out so much. Shohei doesn't strike out that much.
He's got
I saw him strike out.
He does. He does.
He like.
Go ahead.
He's out looking more than swinging, I think.
He took 3. He had a strikeout on 3 pitches where 3 strikes and he was swinging a single one. I think he was guessing and they just kept throwing what he wasn't guessing. Are you happy with him so far?
Man, he gets a hold of one.
Are you happy with Shohei?
Yeah, I am. I was getting nervous at first.
Yeah.
Started off pretty slow, but no, he's and I think he's going to hit 40 homers this year. I think he's going to warm up in the summer.
Yeah.
I think he's got 7 homers now in April. What's 7 times 6? That's 42 homers. If he hits 7 homers every month, he's at over 40 homers.
Well, so, we're 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks in. We're more than a sixth of the way.
True, we started in March.
But I think he actually didn't hit as many homers so far as I thought he would. But that'll pick up. But he does swing hard. But he's gotten a bunch of 2-strike singles where they'll throw him a nasty pitch and he just reaches out and smacks it. You know,
he hits it like 115 miles an hour.
He hit that
because it gets to the fielder so fast. He doesn't have time to stretch it to a double.
That one he hit 119.2, that single that almost took out the right fielder.
Yeah, straight to the right fielder.
Unbelievable.
And it's like, it got there. It got to the right fielder so fast. You wonder if he's going to get thrown out at first.
I know.
The ball got to the fielder so fast, and it's just like,
yeah.
And that's the opposite of Freddie, who looks like he's got like a wedge playing golf, and he's just hitting these chip shots out of the sand pit into left field.
Yeah,
you know, it's just like these little chips, and I'm just like totally different approaches to batting. But the kids like Shohei, man. The kids want to be like Shohei. They don't want to be like Freddie.
Yeah, and he's such a good dude, man. He's just I know there's such a spotlight on him. He's such a cultural icon, and I think he's the perfect person for it, man. He's just has a likable face, even, you know, like you see him in the dugout talker. He told me that he was going and he went to go ask that Outman. Yeah.
They were talking about a pitch. And Outman had hit a home run on a pitch.
And Shohei
was asking him, and you could see like Outman was doing this, like mimicking the rotation of the pitch. Man, it was the same pitch in the same spot. Like 5 batters later, Shohei hit it out the park too.
Same pitch. Wow.
It's like, but he mentally prepared for that. You know, it wasn't just like, I got up there and I swung hard and it went far. He's like, no, he was mentally like prepared for what was about to get thrown to him, and he took advantage of it. And it's like, that's why I love baseball. It would be kind of a boring game if it wasn't for the chess match.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like
if
chess.
It was just like, who's the bigger athlete?
Yeah.
You know, it's not. You got to outthink your opponent.
There's just so much that goes into it. And if you haven't played, I totally get why it could be boring, you know, but just the pitching, every at bat, I know there's like, you know, you have several. Yeah, it's a slow, you know, an at bat's a slow thing to watch. It's not like soccer or football, but I mean, there's just so much going into it. So much going into what pitch to throw, where to put it. Did this guy hit it last time? Where are the holes in his swing? Where is he struggling? There's just so much going into every single pitch that it's just hard to kind of see if you don't know the behind the scenes game, you know? Yeah, man. I've been most excited about Will Smith. I mean, I expect him to be a 280, 290 hitter, but gosh, he's up. I mean,
this is the best season of his life so far.
But he is that good. I've always been shocked at how low his average is compared to when you watch him hit. The guy, he doesn't get cheated. He's got a great eye. He's going to get barrel on the ball. He's a tough out, which I'm shocked that his averages in past has been like 260 or whatever. I'm like, he's a 300 hitter, and it's showing this year. I mean.
Yeah, well, he went and got that 10-year contract, and you know, some people play down after they get their money, but like he's playing better than ever.
Yeah.
Like he's living up to it. And I'm like, okay, I guess they made a statement. Like Will Smith is our catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys, Dalton Rushing and Diego Cartaya, which are two of our top 5 prospects, are catchers. They're like, they're going to move to another position, or we're going to flip them for a pitcher or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? But that's it's the best thing is that we have a really talented roster now, but like we have the pipeline, like we're going to be good for a while.
Yeah.
And like I was talking to a guy who's a Cubs fan the other day, and I'm like, hey, I'm happy Michael Busch is playing so great. You know, he's raking. But I'm like, we didn't have room for him. Yeah. You know, it's like the Dodgers are so good that they're facilitating major leaguers for other teams. Like it's because it's like they get their first pick, and then we have more major leaguers than we have a surplus of major leaguers, and so they got to go somewhere. You know, so Michael Busch, we actually flipped him for a younger prospect. Yeah, really top pitching prospect, but he's only 19.
Oh, is that
so? He may not turn out.
I was wondering who we got for him.
But we're
okay.
He's a flamethrower, drafted out of high school. Like really good prospect, but young and could go anyway. But basically, they reset the clock. They're like, okay, here's a finished product. We'll trade you for a prospect that needs work. You know, and we'll work on them. Okay. But basically, they reset the clock.
Well, and Busch wasn't doing that great with the Dodgers. I mean, they gave him some playing time, and he did okay, right?
I know. But he was ready. It was clear that he was ready. Yeah. And I wonder, though, if we would have traded Lux instead of Busch. I don't know.
Really?
But I think that we thought Lux was the better prospect.
I mean, he's our golden boy, but
he's not been doing it right now. So he's the one I'm hoping figures it out. But, you know, ever since Dave Roberts has been the manager, there's been a pattern. Right around June, end of June, July, we get hot. Like it doesn't even matter how April, May, early June goes. Like all of a sudden they kick into gear. And I don't know what it is about his managerial style, or maybe there's enough data points on the opposition where they start to understand a little bit better. I don't know. But it's happened. Like you remember last year, like we were in 3rd place before the All-Star break. We're in 3rd place, and then we just couldn't lose for 2 months.
Yeah.
You know, Mookie had the month of his life.
Yeah, that was insane.
You know, which would have been the MVP if it wasn't for Acuna.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just think that. So I'm not that anything that happens right now. I'm kind of like, well, I know I've gotten in the rhythm here. I know how this is going to work, but. It's championship or bust. And I'm trying to mitigate that a bit in my mind. I'm like, well, it's not like championship this year or bust. Like we're kind of set for a few years, but it's like I need 2 championships in the next 6 seasons for this to feel like, otherwise we'll feel like we're underachieving. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Like it'll feel like underachieving if we don't get 2 World Series in the next 6 years. That's the, I don't know, arbitrary line I made, but
we won 100 games last year, and then we added Shohei Ohtani and
doesn't matter.
I know. That's why I'm like, we were stacked last year and dropped.
Got swept.
October, man. I feel like, do you feel like the hard thing with the baseball schedule is, I feel like it's with a team like the Dodgers, it's 162 warm-up games for the real thing, because anything can happen come October 1st. And like, even now I feel like, man, don't even risk injuries. Yeah. I know Will Smith sits every second or third game or something and rests his knees. And that's probably smart. You know, it's like, cause at the end of the day, barring some weird miracle or tons of injuries, the Dodgers are going to win the division. Like that's just not like they're going to the playoffs. Like
I think that's probable. Yeah.
What if the Braves though, man? They're talking about stacked. Those guys are stacked. I mean,
they're very good. They're very good.
Their lineup is probably. I mean, is it as stat wise? They're on par with Dodgers. Maybe. I mean, we got a couple superstars that maybe. Well, so do they though.
Acuna's not hitting like he did last year, but he's getting on base and still stealing base. Marcell Ozuna, I think, is leading the league in homers,
and he's up there in average too.
That'll last. I don't think that'll last. I just don't think he's that player. We have enough of a sample size that. For his career that I just don't think he's that guy.
He'll hit 30 home runs though. I mean, well, for sure this year.
I think he'll for sure hit 30 homers.
Austin Riley,
maybe
Who's the other guy? The switch
I like
hitter?
Austin. I like their lineup. I like Austin Riley. I like Matt Olson. Doesn't have the power numbers yet, but he'll probably still be really good. Their pitching staff. I got a buddy who's a Braves fan. And we were talking about pitchers and stuff, and he's like, dude, Max Fried, he's a Dodger. And I'm like, I see. He goes, no, yeah, everyone knows. He's like, all the Braves fans know. He loves the Dodgers.
Well, he grew up a huge Dodger fan, yeah.
Yeah. And he always plays so amazingly well at Dodger Stadium. Like his numbers are insane at Dodger Stadium. But, he's a free agent after this year.
Oh, you think the Dodgers will try to...
Yeah. They think he's like, this is his last year at the Braves. That's what my buddy was saying. And I was like, but we would not sign Max Fried and Walker Buehler, I don't think, who's also a free agent after this year. And I'm like, we'd probably be picking between Fried and Buehler. So I don't know what we would do there, but, and then Shohei's going to pitch next year.
Dustin May should be back, right? I mean,
we're going to have a rotation, man. Kershaw may retire, right? This may be his last season.
I think so. I just think
I hope he gets a appropriate swan song. That's actually my biggest goal for this season as a Dodger fan. My biggest Dodger fan goal is to see him hit 3,000 strikeouts.
Yeah.
See him keep his career ERA below 2.5. And for him to have postseason success. That's like everything else is like, this year is only the beginning. So like, I don't feel like all my chips are in on this year. Like if we don't win it, because we got all these guys for the next several years. All of our best players are under multi-year contracts, but Shaw, this could be it for him. And I want to see him get those career milestones. Like it's a big deal. Like there's not been another Dodger in my lifetime like Kershaw. Like he's probably the best Dodger since I've been born, for sure.
Yeah. Pitcher or all around? I mean,
period. I think.
I wasn't following baseball in his glory days back when he was hitting under 2 ERA like 5 years in a row, like this. That streaky,
yeah, I mean, he won the MVP as a pitcher in 2014.
Yeah, that's wild.
I mean,
three Cy Youngs, I think,
and he got robbed of 2.
Really?
Like people go back and look, and they're like, Kershaw probably should have won the Cy Young that year. What was the guy? He was with the Mets and then went to the Blue Jays, or vice versa. I can't remember his name now. He won. He was with the Mets.
DeGrom?
He won the Cy Young, and you look back at that over Kershaw, and you look at their stats. You're like, what was everyone thinking? Wow. I cannot think of his name. That's how forgettable he is. I can't think of this guy's name.
It's not Jacob DeGrom. DeGrom?
No, it was before DeGrom. I can't think of his name, but like you like go back and you're looking and you're like, what? He had one season.
Yeah.
That was really good. And voter fatigue is a real thing. You don't want to keep voting for the same guy. So the voters are like, well, we voted for Kershaw the last 3 years.
Oh, really?
It's just like voter fatigue's a thing.
So he could have had easily 5 Cy Youngs.
I think so. Yeah.
He's not that. He's what, 36? I mean, that's not young, but is it like why?
No, but he started earlier than most pitchers.
So is his arm just kind of getting worn out? Is that or?
Yeah, he has more time in the major leagues than Max Scherzer and him are like, they were in the same draft class.
Oh, really?
But like
he was
Kershaw had miles on his arm. He'd already been in the majors for a while.
So is it like he's retiring soon because his arm is just worn out?
Probably. I mean, he never had surgery in his life until this offseason. Yeah. So it's entirely possible that they fixed some shit.
Yeah.
And he's going to get that last burst. I don't know. We'll see. That's what I want. He's got 50 strikeouts to go to hit 3,000. Like, that's really my thing. I want to see that because that's exclusive company. I don't think there's I think there's fewer than 3,000 strikeout guys in Major League history.
Those are guys that pitched for like 40 years or something back in the back in the olden days when
like 3,000's he's a first ballot Hall of Famer anyway. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't need that, but it's a huge accomplishment. Yeah. To say that 3,000 strikeouts.
Yeah.
But like There's a couple like Verlander's hit 3,000, Scherzer hit 3,000.
Oh, did there? Oh,
but they're more strikeout power pitchers than Kershaw has been. His ERA is insane. I think he has the lowest ERA in Major League history. Kershaw.
Really?
Yeah, I need to double check it, but I think he has the lowest ERA for a career.
The problem is you go back in like the dead ball era and you get these weird stats that like, well, that's
right.
just...
I think since since not counting that,
Okay.
I think it's at like 2.4 is his career ERA, something like that. And that's what I'm saying. I just don't want him to ruin that.
All right. Well, looks like Jay cut out, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this out. So thank you. Thanks again for listening to this rambling episode, and appreciate Jay for being on the podcast to talk about all kinds of interesting things. So we'll see you next time on Theology and Raw.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.